Good morning, everyone, or whenever you're watching, whatever time it might be. My name is Reverend Victoria Bomberry, and I am so pleased to be with you this morning here on the New Thought Media Network, the Science of Mind and Spirit lecture series. And as you know, we've been spending this year looking at the Science of Mind textbook, and over the past couple of months, we've been looking at ways that we apply this teaching. And actually, we're spending some time, well, I'm spending some time today looking at how we're in dialogue with things that are coming out in psychology and in that science, right? So we're really looking at that this morning with this talk that is titled Sharing the Flow. And first of all, I want to say that there's a number of ways we can look at flow. And flow is something that was studied by the psychologist Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. And I have to really work at saying that name. It's a very long name, but it's Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, who actually coined this term flow. And it's in back in the 90s. So it's been in the lexicon, and we kind of use it all kinds of ways. And you've probably seen it, numbers of time. And we talk about, flow is used in different ways. Flow is used for like water, water flows and what the flow rates are, and through pipes. And, there's all kinds of applications of this term flow. But what we're looking at is something that comes out of psychology as flow. Now, when we actually talk about psychology and flow, I think that we need to define it in those terms and then put it into dialogue with science of mind and spirit, and how we are using that term flow. And actually, flow, I think, is flow and unfolding. These are words that we hear a lot in New Thought. So we're going to focus and really understand flow from the aspect of psychology, and then move that into what it means for us as religious scientists. So flow, like I said, was a term that was coined by Dr. Csikszentmihalyi back in the 90s. And what he did, he began actually with a question when he was quite young, because he came out of the post-World War II years in Europe, and he was looking at what was going on with people and how they were handling the trauma that they had experienced with this tremendous upheaval and violence that Second World War visited upon people and what they were engaged in. So there was just this malaise that was over all of Europe, and kind of a struggle to make sense of life and make some sort of meaning, to come into understanding what is meaning and purpose in life. And if we look at the different philosophical strands that came out after that, during this period. And excuse me, I have an unhappy dog this morning. She is and I can't lock her up because she'll be even more unhappy. But let me go back to looking at the World War II and what was going on, and the other kinds of strands of philosophy that were coming out at that time. So we have the existential movement, started to, really come up during that period because all at once, there's this feeling that there cannot be, what is the meaning? And we still use that term very often, having an existential crisis when we lose track of the meaning of life, or we get kind of thrown off board about uh, where our life is going. Well, this was the milieu that Dr. Csikszentmihalyi grew up in, and he was a teenager when he went to a lecture by this man. It was going to be about flying saucers, if and this was back probably in the 40s or 50s, right, early 50s, and he went to this lecture, and this lecturer was talking about how people were projecting um, flying saucers as a way of coping with the trauma that they had experienced in the war. And that lecturer, linked this to looking at ancient symbols like mandalas and other kinds of phenomenon and other kinds of religious practice. So he was bringing these two phenomenon together, one from psychology and one from spirit together. And this researcher and lecturer was Carl Jung. So this really piqued the interest of Csikszentmihalyi, and he wanted to find out, how do we respond, how do we find meaning, and how do we find happiness? Even more than meaning, how do we find happiness in the midst of things that are tremendously traumatic and disheartening? And so this really sent him on this lifetime journey of looking into happiness and what that means. So he spent hundreds of hours observing artists at work and interviewing them about the nature of their experience, because there's something about that creative act, right? The creative act has something in it that goes into a different kind of consciousness. When you're involved in the creative act, it, the best way that I can describe it is thinking about that beautiful painting by Michelangelo of uh, David touching the hand of God, right? I think it's David. Well, anyway, man touching the hand of God. There is that kind of feeling that is expressed when the creative process is at work. And of course, we focus as religious scientists on that creative aspect and the consciousness that is awakened in the creativity. So this is what Csikszentmihalyi also, noticed, that there was something that happened, that artists were describing exactly the same sort of experience over and over again. It seemed to be universal, and it moved beyond artists. He interviewed all kinds of people. He found that this dimension of human experience that just crosses all kinds of areas, from Japanese teenaged motorcycle gang members, assembly line workers in Chicago, athletes, surgeons, Navajo sheep herders. The list goes on and on, who describe the same sort of experience. And the characteristics of this experience of flow include joy, deep concentration, emotional buoyancy, a heightened sense of mastery, a lack of self-consciousness and self-transcendence. Now that's an interesting point, and it's an important one. There's a transcendence of self that happens in this experience of flow. So by 1990, uh-oh, I froze for a minute with one of those awful looks on my face. But anyway, by 1990, Csikszentmihalyi wrote a book for a popular audience, and it was called Flow, The Psychology of Optimal Experience. So this flow is considered an optimal human experience. And of course, when someone puts this out into the culture, right, in such a concentrated way with such universal application, the natural thing to do is, how can I be in flow? Right? How can I be in that place of this heightened human experience that has all of these qualities, right? Who doesn't want to reside there, right? And enjoy and just this different kind of consciousness with this intense creativity, right? So there's also this idea of merging action and awareness, and that creates these moments of freedom. That's another quality of it, a moment of absolute freedom. And kind of look at this, we've got this transcendence of self, so sort of absolutely no self-consciousness, transcendence of self, and this intense awareness coupled with action. And at its core, it has this unified consciousness, right? Unified consciousness. It's a feeling of that unified consciousness. And this is where we kind of move in to something a little bit different than just a pure psychological explanation of flow. And I'm just going to point out that I think that probably most people have experienced flow in their life. And recently I was talking with a women's group that I attend, and people started talking about, well, one person started talking about how they were involved in a writing project right now, and how the writing project just kind of took her away. That she was engaged in writing, and she began in the morning, and before she knew it, she was so concentrated on writing that she just wrote all day long without a sense of awareness of time. There was no time, there was no self in this. It seemed to be writing itself, and she was just there, in this intense feeling of well-being and joy, writing. So as she described that, another person talked about what it's like for her when she is involved in doing a knitting design, planning it out, putting it together, and actually doing the work of creating that design. And and the design process and the construction process is very complex, and requires skill, just as the writing process requires skill, right? And we're going to look at this, the skill that's involved. And then another person talked about painting, what happens to her when she's painting. And it was the same thing. Hours pass by, and there's this deep absorption and this feeling of well-being and that transcendence of self. And then another person talked about taking care of baby chicks. And there's some skill involved in that as well. Just taking care of these little tiny creatures. And, what she talked about the process and how she would become so involved in it that the whole day would pass by and she would just be completely absorbed in it. And then I remembered, when I was a young woman, I was talking to a man who was a janitor. And, to me, at that point in my life, I thought that that would be just such work of such drudgery. And, it seemed like it would just be soul killing. But when he described what he was doing just in this cleaning process that he did, and, he cleaned all kinds of things as a janitor. And he talked about how he was using a polish to polish this brass. Uh, well, what do you call those things? Brass parts of a staircase. So they were decorative, but also, had a purpose to them. And he was talking about the care he took in polishing them. And he was in a state of flow. And he had a sense of well-being. He had a sense of transcending self. He had this sense of doing something that made him happy. And it also, there was something that was beyond just the cleaning of it, right? It was well beyond that. And it kind of reminded me of when Dr. Martin Luther King said, whatever you do, put your whole self into it, right? And in putting your whole self into it, there is a transcendence of self. And there is something that comes into our consciousness that switches us to something that I think, goes beyond what we talk about in psychology, which is about brain and, different behaviors and things like that. It brings us to a different kind of awareness. And I would call that, almost, well, I would call it akin to a mystical experience. It's on the same level as that. And of course, I don't want to make that connection too strongly in terms of course, when we're involved in a uh, true unification with God. I think there probably is, some difference there, but there is that that possibility of getting there through our work and being in this whole sense of flow, this phenomenon, this human dimension of flow. And it makes me excited to think that we have this as part of our makeup, that we have that ability to enter the flow uh, through awareness and action and self-transcendence. And what we're talking about today is sharing that flow, which is, an element that I think we may bypass when we're thinking about, the actions that, or the activities that we're engaged in when we feel that sense of flow, when we get in the flow. And, a very necessary part of flow, in my opinion, and, in my knowing, is that we have to share that flow, that, that is part of being in a beloved community. And Desmond, and let's look at, our time right now. Everyone lives in a historic time with challenges and things that are coming to the fore that need to be addressed. And Desmond Tutu, in writing about his experience in all that he's gone through, and looking at where we are right now, says we are living in an historic moment. We are each called to take part in a great transformation. Our survival as a species is threatened by global warming, economic meltdown, and an ever increasing gap between rich and poor. Yet these threats offer an opportunity to awaken as an interconnected and beloved community. So, what I want to do this morning in talking about the sharing of the flow is to talk about what it is to be in community, be in relationships, and be engaged in creating what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community. Others have called it divine community. It's all about this this creation of something that is different than those things that we have lived in the past, that we are coming into an awareness that, yes, we are individuated spiritual beings, right? We have that as having this human incarnation. We individuate. And at the same time, we are actively engaged in recognizing our interconnectedness and unification with all of life. And that's important. That's an important part of this whole concept of flow. It is that individuation, and it's also that connection with life. So Martin Luther King said, "Love is creative and redemptive. Love builds up and unites. Hate tears down and destroys. The aftermath of the fight with fire method is bitterness and chaos. The aftermath of the love method is reconciliation and creation of the beloved community." Yes, love, which means understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill, even for one's enemies, is the solution. So, we're I think that we're poised at this time, right now, where especially in New Thought circles, that we, and I think what drew me to Centers for Spiritual Living was just a brief statement by Ernest Holmes about not being against, right? And and it's been interpreted various ways. And the way that I see that is that, not creating enemies where there really are none. There are conflicts, there are miscommunications, there are clashes of ideologies. I mean, there's all kinds of things that go on, right? And yet, through love and this creation, right, this creative process, we can move through all of that. And this is where we are called right now to work and share the flow. So, flow, being in the flow of spirit. That's how we understand this, right? As religious scientists, being in the flow of spirit. And, as we, it's kind of interesting to look at, what comes out of different disciplines and then bring them together into a dialogue. And what do we come out with at the end of that, right? At the end of this dialogue. Now, if we look at the activists, these spiritual activists, uh, uh, Dr. Martin Luther King and Desmond Tutu, they combined their spiritual understanding with this deep engagement, awareness coupled with this state of flow. And added to that, love, operating from that sense of love. So this is what flow is about. It's not just about, being involved in our everyday lives. It's also about being involved in the world. And our creations, what we create, go into the construction of the beloved community, because everyone has a part to play in creating that, Now, some of the things that allow us to get into that place of flow are skill. When we do our spiritual practices, we are building our spiritual skills. We are building the ability to respond to things through love, to see that we are a part of creation, that we're not separate from it. There's absolutely no separation. That nothing is against us, and we're not against anything and we're not creating enemies. The universe is not our enemy. We don't have to create enemies, because out of love and entering into this space of flow, we share something that goes beyond our individual expression. It becomes a part of the flow, this cosmic flow, the cosmic flow of life. And what are some of the things that really put us there? It is an engagement with life and an appreciation of life, and the just that deep gratitude for life, and that is what creates the optimum. Is a part of this optimum experience that people say that makes them feel in this amazing way. And there's also different things involved in this as well. We need to challenge ourselves. If we get in a place and we think, oh, we're just going to stay in this flow forever, right? Well, we have to have a challenge. We have to challenge ourselves to move even more into this awareness, right? And a letting go of self, a transcendence of self. And I really like what I read in the Tricycle magazine recently about thinking about ego. Sometimes we make this author was saying that we make we tend to make the ego a villain, right? And for Freud, another psychologist, right? The father of modern psychology in many people's estimation, said that, really the ego is kind of a tragic figure, right? Because it has all these responsibilities placed on it, for us to interface with the world and survive in the world. And that's what the ego's job is. So it's really, kind of overworked. So even giving the ego a break, right, to transcend that ego, say, you take a vacation. We're going into flow is an act of compassion for ourselves, right? So we don't have to be against ego. We don't have to make it an enemy. We don't have to do any of that. We just have to understand that those things that hold us back from flow stem from that a sense of having to protect ourselves from something, protect ourselves from life. And when we trust life, when we trust in the goodness, then we can kind of move into this area. When we have spiritual skills, when we develop our skills, whatever they might be. And, I love that, it was so profound to me when I talked to that janitor. And I was a young woman, and it really just kind of clicked for me that we can find that joy and happiness in our ordinary daily lives. Yes, yes, we have to be, moving up and challenging ourselves to kind of have that optimum human experience. And we can always do that at whatever stage we might be at. You know, the problem is staying at the same stage. For the sous shop people in British Columbia, uh, and this is an interesting point too that I just want to point out. And we're getting. I'm kind of looking over at my clock here. I realize I can just look up, but I still feel like I have to move my body to look at the clock. But anyway, for the shoe shop people, the they would have just these beautiful, beautiful villages that were operative. They, had everything that was needed in that area. They had everything set up perfectly so that everything worked. And yet, the leaders of the community every 20 years or so would have the entire village move to another location. Now we can look at, a lot of different factors, maybe, but I think the most important factor is that in this move, there were new challenges to meet, new skills to develop, to live in a slightly different environment. And, and maybe a radically different environment at sometimes. There was this necessity for up leveling and coming to know life in a deeper way. So, flow requires that. To get into the flow, we need that challenge. What are some of the barriers to flow? And again, look, I'm talking about a collectivity, a group of people working together to recreate the optimum conditions for flow in their community. And of course, I as a Native person, I believe that we had ways that worked and just beauty that were built in to our lives and deep, deep wisdom. So these are things that people have been thinking about forever. maybe that term flow wasn't used, but it's definitely a part of our human experience to experience this uh, optimal flow in our life. So, what is something that hinders us from entering the flow? One of the things that hinders us from entering the flow is apathy. And, we can see apathy come up for a number of reasons. And one of the reasons is, just believing that you can't make a difference, you have no meaning, right? And that was sort of the existential crisis that was coming out of War II. And we see it come up over and over again. We have an environmental crisis right now, that is looming very large over, the life of the planet. We have the pandemic, right? We have all of these different things that are tied to environmental issues. And it's very easy for people to become apathetic, not rise to that challenge, but to remain apathetic. And that is definitely an an impediment to entering the flow. Another thing that is a deep impediment to entering the flow is anxiety. And anxiety can, kind of has the same birthplace as apathy, right? You know, uh, Feeling overwhelmed, feeling, a sense of dread, a sense of doom, all of those kinds of things. And yet, you know, there have always been tremendous challenges to human existence. And we have people of deep wisdom and incredible optimism who have risen to those challenges and entered those places of incredible states of creativity and self transcendence. And that shedding of that tragic figure of the ego allowed them to have this much bigger vision of the world and of their communities, right? Those chiefs who saw, oh, look, we have everything that we need, but there's something missing. There's something missing. That happiness quotient, that joy quotient, that's missing. We have to do something. So let's move to a different location. That was that innate wisdom at work, fueled by observation and love of community. So in sharing this flow, as we get more, as we practice and we become more skillful, and we need those extra challenges to continue this upward spiral to uplift our communities. Uh, I think that makes me excited, and I have to say, I have been in those places of apathy. I've been in those places of high anxiety, and I have been in the flow. It's all a part of life. So when we start to become aware of where we are at any given moment, we have the opportunity to change, right? We have that opportunity to change what we're doing and make that next step into uh, increasing our own flow, right? But sharing that flow and our gifts with community and ultimately the entire planet. One person can do a lot. A few people can do even more. An awakened community can change the entire world. So when, flow necessitates a bringing together of spirit and the psychological aspects of who we are as human beings. We have to have both of those. We're not just machines. We're not machines. We have things that are sort of mechanical and as part of our systems that run our body, but we have that part of us that is spirit, that is soul, that is that yearns to be in community, to be unified with others and unified with God. So when you get into that next time of flow, think about what it is that you're doing. Uh, how is it affecting life, right? The life of your neighbors. Are you creating beauty? Are you creating something that is going to bring joy to somebody? What is this flow about? It's not just a mechanical thing. It's something that requires relationship in order to blossom and truly be a spiritual practice and experience. So I'm so happy that we were able to speak about flow this morning. And I just want to remind you that we are so grateful for the New Thought Media Network, for all of the things that it brings to us. Uh, you know, I'm always tuning in to something, and I just get excited about it, right? To see all of the things that people are doing, and what people are talking about, and having the chance to pray with others. And meeting new people, making those connections. So I'm hoping that you are enjoying this just as much as I am, this New Thought Media Network. And if you are, be sure to, make a donation. We really appreciate that, being able to come to you and bring you these offerings and just adding to our combined collective experience and understanding of spirit. So I am so grateful for all of you, and I am wishing you a wonderful week, a week where you experience flow and you share that flow with everyone you meet. And so it is.